Abraham accepted God's promise of a son without question, trusting in divine power. The vastness of the stars reflected the greatness of God's covenant, igniting a spark of hope in Abraham's heart as he envisioned the countless descendants that would follow. Yet, as years passed without fulfillment, doubt began to creep in. Each day stretched into the next, filled with unfulfilled longing. Abraham's once steadfast faith began to waver as he and Sarah exchanged anxious glances, questioning God's timing. Desperate to fulfill God's promise, Sarah suggested that Abraham take her handmaiden, Hagar, as a secondary wife. It seemed a reasonable plan, a solution to their childlessness. Yet, beneath the surface, a troubling tide of conflict began to rise. Abraham's marriage to Hagar, while culturally accepted, went against God's law and disrupted family harmony. Instead of fulfilling God's promise, it led to jealousy and discord, causing immediate strife and setting a troubling precedent. This choice resulted in lasting conflict for generations. Hagar's pride and contempt for Sarah disturbed their once happy home. Hagar flaunted her pregnancy, deepening Sarah's anguish. A storm of jealousy brewed, threatening to drown the love they once shared as bitterness seeped into every corner of their lives. Overwhelmed by harsh treatment and the weight of her status, Hagar fled into the wilderness. Each step away from the tent felt like freedom, yet it was a lonely path. The desolation of the desert mirrored her despair as she sought solace in solitude. But the Lord sent an angel to comfort her, reminding her of her duty. The angel's voice pierced the silence, assuring Hagar that she was seen and heard, rekindling a flicker of hope within her heart as she realized God's plan still included her and her child. The angel promised that her son, Ishmael, would also become a great nation. Hagar's eyes widened in disbelief as the weight of God's promise settled in her heart, transforming her fear into hope, igniting a new purpose within her soul. As Abraham neared 100 years old, God reaffirmed the promise of a son through Sarah. In that moment, the air crackled with divine energy. Abraham's heart raced with renewed hope as God reminded him of his unwavering faithfulness and the fulfillment yet to come. Abraham clung to Ishmael, hoping he would be the heir. Doubts resurfaced, whispering fears that God's promise might pass him by. He wrestled with the reality of his two sons, torn between the love for Ishmael and the anticipation of Isaac. But God clarified that Isaac would be the child of promise, and Ishmael would also be blessed. Abraham listened intently, the weight of divine purpose grounding him. God's assurance strengthened his faith, solidifying the path ahead. The birth of Isaac brought immense joy, fulfilling a lifelong dream. Laughter and celebration echoed through the tent as the long-awaited promise had arrived. In this moment, hope blossomed anew, illuminating the hearts of all who witnessed God's faithfulness. But this joy also led to the painful reality of Hagar and Ishmael's status. From the outskirts, Hagar's heart ached as she watched the family dynamics shift. The light of Isaac's birth cast shadows on their past, igniting the flames of resentment. As Ishmael mocked Isaac, Sarah urged Abraham to send them away. The laughter of the celebration turned to whispers of strife. Sarah's protective instincts flared, fearing Ishmael's presence would threaten Isaac's future, forcing Abraham to confront a heartbreaking decision. The thought of sending away his beloved son filled Abraham with distress. Torn between his love for Ishmael and the demands of Sarah, he wrestled with heartache. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, a battle between duty and love. But God directed Abraham to follow Sarah's request for the sake of peace. In that moment of surrender, clarity washed over him. Abraham understood that obedience to God's will was paramount, even when it led him to a painful crossroads. With a heavy heart, Abraham obeyed, knowing it was for the best. He held Ishmael close, whispering words of love and blessing, the final embrace tinged with sorrow. As he watched them depart, his heart shattered, echoing with the weight of loss. Years later, God tested Abraham again, commanding him to sacrifice Isaac. A deep sense of dread washed over him as he grappled with this unimaginable command. Faith and anguish collided within him, a storm of uncertainty swirling in the quiet night. This command pierced Abraham's heart, for Isaac was his beloved son. The weight of God's request loomed large, casting a shadow over Abraham's spirit. Doubt crept in, but the call to faith rang louder, urging him to trust in God's greater plan. Satan whispered doubts, urging Abraham to question the command. The night air thickened with tension as fears clawed at his resolve. Yet amid the turmoil, a glimmer of faith began to rise, reminding him of God's promises that had always endured. Despite his turmoil, Abraham set off with Isaac, determined to obey. Each step felt like a weighty burden as they traveled toward the unknown. Abraham's heart wrestled with sorrow, yet he pressed forward, bound by faith and unwavering commitment. Abraham prepared for the sacrifice, hiding his inner conflict. The weight of expectation loomed as he arranged the wood, each movement heavy with dread. The innocence in Isaac's eyes only deepened the ache in Abraham's heart as he masked his turmoil. In innocence, Isaac asked, "Where is the lamb for the offering?" His voice broke the silence, pulling at Abraham's heartstrings. This question pierced through the tension, forcing Abraham to confront the reality of their grim journey. With a heavy heart, Abraham replied, "God will provide the lamb." His voice trembled with conviction, a blend of faith and sorrow. Abraham's response encapsulated the trust he had in God's promise, even in this darkest hour. They arrived at the appointed place, and Abraham began to construct the altar. Each stone laid was a testament to his faith, a painful reminder of the sacrifice that loomed ahead. The air was thick with unspoken words and heavy hearts. With a heavy heart, Abraham explained the command to Isaac. He saw the confusion and fear in his son's eyes, but also the trust. In that moment, the bond between father and son deepened, forged in faith amid impending sacrifice. The journey up the mountain felt eternal. Each step was laden with the weight of Abraham's heartache. Silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the sound of their footsteps. They climbed together, bound by faith and the promise of God. At the pinnacle of obedience, Abraham raised the knife, ready to fulfill God's command. His heart ached, torn between love for Isaac and devotion to God. In that moment, time seemed to stand still, the world holding its breath. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord called out, "Abraham! Abraham!" The divine voice broke through the tension, shattering the silence. Abraham's heart raced as he felt the weight of mercy and grace in that moment of intervention. Looking up, Abraham saw a ram caught by its horns. God had provided a substitute, a testament to his faithfulness. Tears of relief streamed down Abraham's face as gratitude flooded his heart, knowing that God's promises always prevail. Abraham named the place Jehovah Jireh, declaring that the Lord will provide. In this sacred moment, his faith was reaffirmed, echoing the truth that God's provision surpasses human understanding, even in the darkest of trials. God reaffirmed his covenant with Abraham, promising blessings for generations. The legacy of faith continued, reaching far beyond Abraham and Isaac, igniting hope for countless lives. The journey of faith had forged a path for the generations to come.